Hello, survivors. Welcome to the State of Decay 2 stream. I'm your host, Geoffrey Card, and the public test realm is live. This is the thing that we've been referring to in the past as the open beta, but public test realm is kind of a better word for it. That's sort of a situation where you are playing in a branch of a live game where you get access to in-development features and you get the chance to give us feedback and let us work on those features and ship a better version of them to the general public by the time they're ready. Last week, we talked about Plague Territory, which is a brand new feature in that public test realm that a few players have actually gotten the chance to try out now. It adds a new strategic challenge to the game, where Plague Hearts now own sections of the map, and the only way you can claim outposts or bases within that territory is to first defeat the Plague Heart. Today, we're here to talk about the other side of that coin, the reward that you get for facing down that strategic challenge. We're calling it the Outpost Upgrade. And this is basically, it's a feature that gives you more control over your community building strategy. It gives you more ways to satisfy your people's needs. It gives you new ways to access skills for your community. And we've brought in a couple of very well-informed guests to demonstrate to you how this update works. Starting with Lucy TIbbits. Lucy TIbbits is the systems designer who's been in the trenches for months trying different approaches to outposts until we landed on this upgrade. Lucy.
I'm so happy to finally be able to reveal this. It's here. It's been discovered by a lot of people, and I'm excited to see your feedback.
And this isn't the only thing that Lucy's been working on, but it is the only one we can talk about right now, so we're going to have to be satisfied with that. Joe Swarner, you all know Joe. He's our tireless customer advocate and one of the most important voices in the studio when it comes to how our weird ideas actually work for real players. What do you think about this feature, Joe?
This feature is a great example of us listening to the community and then coming up with some ideas for how to put it into the game. Lucy's done a fabulous job, as did the rest of the team. But Lucy certainly led the charge on these outposts, and I'm certainly grateful, and I think everybody out there should be too, that she's here with us today.
And of course, you all know our art director, Brant Fitzgerald. What I've always appreciated about Brant is how connected he is to our community. He's built some really important friendships there, and unfortunately, that community has just suffered a loss. And I'm going to leave it to Brant to explain what we're talking about.
So a few weeks ago, found out that one of our this longest running fans and supporters of the community passed away. His name was PhD Peddler. He was, for those of you who knew him, he was, an amazing person, always friendly, always a quiet voice, who was supportive, and, would take the time to listen to anybody. For those of you who didn't know him, you're benefiting from a community that he helped build, a really positive, good community. And I'm going to lose it here in a second. Go ahead and go to the next. He was never without an Undead Lab shirt on or a State of Decay shirt. Over the years, he and his wife traveled to Seattle a couple times, and I was lucky enough to spend time with him and his wife. They loved traveling and eating at various places, and they loved coming out to Seattle to eat the seafood out here. And so I was the beneficiary of getting to spend time with him. One of the things that because he was so into food, he was also well known, very close to world class as far creating barbecue. And go ahead. Yeah. So over the years, I couldn't help but salivate every time I watched his Twitter feed for his barbecue updates. So much so that he got his own restaurant in the game, mostly because I really wanted him to someday come up here and make us all barbecue here at the lab. But he and his family have been so supportive, and his son too. They played a lot. not only did they get Peddler's Barbecue as an in-game place to go, but eventually they got barbecue-inspired weapons. So if you guys see the spatula or the barbecue fork, those are also dedicated to Peddler and his family. And he's just, I can't. Oh, there's the game that we made. Because we like, for some reason I went on a kick making board games for people, and Peddlers was the one that actually we could make into a real game. And all those little cards on the ground there are all photos that I took off of his social media feeds of his barbecue. So he was always happy to run across that in the game. But he did so much for our community. It was the least we could do to honor him. I'll miss his crooked grin, and mostly I'll miss my dear friend. But it's a big loss for us all, and he'll always be remembered. So thanks for listening.
Well, thank you, Brant. I mean, I don't think any of us could imagine saying that better. And we're going to have to get on to the subject of the stream, but Peddler is always going to be an important part of this game for us and for the rest of our community, and we really want folks to remember him. So, moving into what we're here to talk about today. So to talk about the Outpost upgrade, I've got the same community here that we tested with last week when we were looking at Plague Territory. So I've respawned the map so we can kind of start from scratch here. And actually, let me move everybody over to the right side of the screen, because we should start looking at what we're talking about when we talk about the Outpost upgrade, starting with maybe the resource outposts. Lucy, do you want to sort of talk about what has changed about a lot of the outposts in the game?
Yes, I do. As I Reddit noted last week in a momentary screenshot of this same community, outposts that you collect resources from, they are now upgradable. You can upgrade them up to 2 times, and each time you increase the amount of that resource you collect, and at level 2 you also unlock the ability to train one specific skill out of the community skills. Several other outposts, or each outpost has one skill on it, and then some of the other existing outpost types that we have out there have access to the other skill books. Like now, Power and Water outpost will train utilities. I believe Espresso is cooking, and the Radio Booster / the Cell Tower ones, those are where you can train the elusive computer skill.
Which is always the one that I can never find. Like, I had a community once where I spent ages trying to get someone with computers, and I finally got someone with programming, and then on the way home, they were eaten by a juggernaut, and I was so frustrated.
Oh, no.
So now we've got some more options, though. So let me go claim one of these while you sort of talk about it a little bit. By the way, I should say, we should have put a watermark on the screen to say beta footage, because unfortunately the version of the game that went into the public test realm has got some lighting bugs in it that will not be in the final version of this. But unfortunately, occasionally you're going to see places like this where the objects are dark, the floor is bright, and just please forgive us for that and be patient. Anyway, gonna deal with these guys before I can claim the outpost.
But yeah, so you're gonna be able to collect more resources, train skills. The skill training actions are based off of the. I'm not sure how many people have claimed the truck stop base on Dam, or the what's it called?
Providence Ridge?
Yes, Providence Ridge. But that one has a special action on the auto mechanics shop built in, where you can train mechanics. So we basically just took that action, which costs influence, and now you can use that on a bunch of other places. This doesn't mean that your skill book drop items are going away. We might change the frequency that they appear, but for the most part, we think that both are still valid options for the player to try and find ways of getting the knowledge they want in their community. Because it's already hard enough right now to find somebody without a fifth skill.
That's true. In my community
we
here.
got a quick question.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, what's up?
So the Guard Spray asks, can you use the same skill book repeatedly on a character to level up their fifth skill?
If you mean the actions on the outpost, yes. The action itself is called Learn or Train skill name, for that reason. So if you are trying to, level up your cooking skill faster, so you can get to, or rather, not cooking. So say you have a food outpost and you're trying to upgrade up to level 2 or level 3. You can just use the train skill action a bunch to get it specialized, so that you can have the right. Well, actually, why don't we show? You're at an ammo outpost right now, aren't you?
Yes,
Geoffrey?
I am.
Okay.
I've just started upgrading it. And by the way, I should point out, there's a new bit of UX here. When you interact with an outpost, you can now decide whether you want to go for the supply locker or open it up like a facility, which is kind of a nice, convenient way to deal with it. Now, what did you want me to look at?
I forget. How long did I set the upgrade action
Just 1
for?
minute. Just 1 minute. So
Okay.
yeah, it won't be that long.
Cool. In the meantime, I guess we could field any additional questions that are coming through.
If I may also take a crack at that same question that I just raised.
Mm-hmm.
I actually spent some time playing the beta this weekend, and I was able to take a character from 1 star in medicine all the way up to 7 stars in pathology using the new outpost technique.
Nice.
So the answer is yes, you definitely can. And Geoffrey's going to show you exactly how to do that, although his example is going to lead you to chemistry. The next question comes from Angel Eyes, and are there any outposts where you can learn mechanics?
Yes, that is on the fuel outpost, I believe is what I decided on.
Yes, I think it's over here. Yeah, you can
Yeah,
see upgrade to learn mechanics.
I tried to make each of the skills available on an outpost that makes sense or connects to its resource. So fuel and auto mechanics both deal with cars, or sorry, just mechanics, not auto mechanics. That's specialization. And then chemistry and munitions made the most sense as that pair. A couple of these were kind of hard to decide on, though. Giving up cooking off at the food outpost was one that was very, very tricky to decide on. Anyways, you can see the upgrade action there. It actually requires you to have the skill, Geoffrey.
Yeah, so I need to go grab a different character. Yeah, so we've upgraded it to level 2. At level 2, it has the ability to train us in the skill, but I need to go grab a character who doesn't already have a 5th skill.
But you can change characters at the outpost, though.
Oh, that's true. I totally can. Why did I not do that? That would have been so much smarter. Actually, it's probably a good idea to run back here because we, on the outside of my base, we actually do have proper lighting. So let me switch. Let me find a character. Oh, let's be Austin. I'll let everybody else deal with that juggernaut.
Like any true leader.
So do I actually have to be physically at that outpost to do the training with the character?
Oh
yeah.
I believe yes, we do.
We must.
I know for a while we couldn't, so that is a brand new feature we added to the game to make that happen, because it doesn't make sense that you just learn anywhere. You got to have some time, get your books out and have a flashcard session or hands-on training. So at the outpost made the most sense.
All right, well let's head back to that outpost.
While you're heading back there, Geoffrey, I've got a question that I will answer. You are cholesterol, and I think Bro Norby have asked basically the same question. Will the physical look of the outpost ever change when being upgraded? And currently, no. And the reason is boring and sad, is that we are already pushing our streaming limits on these in any of these map areas, and having yet another possibility of a different layout loaded is problematic memory wise. What I can say is that we're looking into ways to aesthetically make things obvious that it's an outpost. That's all I can say. But we're looking into ways to do that. So thanks for being patient.
So okay, so we've showed up with a character who does not already have a 5th skill, and now when I interact with this outpost, we've got this skill book option that I can select. Do you want me to select it?
Yeah, go ahead. And then it does just cost you a bit of influence. So like with the recruiting, we're trying to add new things that you can spend influence on, especially for the players who are just hoarding it because they're just killing so many zombies. And that way you have access to the skill. You can train it up at whatever speed suits your needs, and use them for your community. And then once you have somebody with just the basic skill that the Outpost provides, then you can upgrade it to its final level, where it gives, I believe, 3 times as much. So that'll be a very I'm both excited and terrified for the implications that this update has on the resource economy of State of Decay 2, because suddenly you can get 3 food a day from an outpost, or 3 ammo a day from an outpost. It also might not be just the route that everybody takes, but it does free players up to have more options that they've put in their base with facilities. Like, there's no longer like the essential locked in facilities 100% of the time. So I hope that everyone is able to find that a bit more versatile.
Yeah, that is one of the main focuses. There's several different reasons why we wanted to approach this feature. One of them was because we needed something to sort of counterbalance the plague territory feature, because the plague territory feature was making the game a little bit more challenging and making the outposts a little bit less accessible. And so, Eric and Lucy correctly judged that we needed to have something positive on the other side to balance it out, so that if you're sort of investing the time and the effort to conquer these plague hearts and free up these areas to let you claim these outposts, you should also have something on the other side that's giving you commensurate benefits. So that's one of the reasons. But another one of the reasons, actually, I forgot the other reason was that I was going to say. So what were you talking about a second ago, Lucy?
I've got a quick question for Lucy here. Will the price of the outpost upgrades change as the difficulty gets harder? That's from Thomas Wasili.
I think that's a matter I'm still undecided on. So if whatever is currently in the beta, you might see changes to that by the end, but I make no guarantees for now because it's up in the air.
Now, also a follow-up. A lot of people have been asking whether just standard house outposts where you get beds are upgradable.
Unfortunately, no. And I realize that's an item that a lot of people in the community want, so I'm looking into it for potentially the future. No promises on timeline, obviously, but the difficulty that we were encountering with with this first, outposts being upgradable is a brand new concept. So the biggest issue we encountered in playtesting is trying to help players understand which outposts they can expect to find that have upgrades on them. So the solution that we arrived at for the time being was just using the resource outposts as having upgrades, because that way you can kind of put that under one single communication blanket. And the second reason is that the bed's economy needs a little bit of observation. We love how much diversity of facilities we have in the game for that, but we also recognize that it is possible to get like 14 or 15 beds if you're really up to it, but you can't get that many people in our community. So it needs some revision, but as soon as we have the chance to revise that, we will also be looking into upgrades for the bed outposts.
That actually reminds me of the point that I was going to make earlier, which is that one of the other reasons why we liked this feature, like the idea of adding this feature, was the fact that it opens up so many more base building opportunities. Lucy alluded to this earlier. The fact that there's sort of a list of facilities that your typical experienced player will just go for every single time, and there's a certain list of facilities that people don't use very often because they just don't. You've got limited room for facilities, and some of them just don't rise to the level of be able to compete with, say, the hydroponics or the farm, or some of these, these facilities that give you, critical survival resources. And so one of the benefits of this feature is the fact that now that you can go get your food somewhere other than a hydroponics spot or other than a farm, now you can say, okay, well, you know what? This base isn't going to have a farm. This base isn't going to have a hydroponics room. And
speaking of, Geoffrey, if you look on the map, do you know what kind of rucksack you're going to get from this plague heart?
Oh, that's a very good question. How about I get away from the things that are threatening my life so that I can do that?
Too late.
Go away, go away, go away. Go away. Okay, anyway. Yeah, so this plague heart, let's just hide all of the people for a second. right now, let's see here. Where? Oh gosh, I'm being attacked. Never mind. You know what?
Yeah, you're about to get eaten by a horde.
Yeah, go ahead and if somebody wants to just screenshot what I just did, I'm sure you'll find it somewhere. Let's go deal with the plague heart so we can make these guys go away.
Yeah, you do as that. Short summary is that you can now see what type of rucksack will be dropped when you find a plague heart and defeat it. And this was partially like to help players decide which hearts to tackle first, because when you're just going off of distance, like sometimes that's not enough to like motivate you to visit all, like, you know, it's another factor into your decision making that we think will make this interesting.
Yeah, so right now, I just took out that plague heart because I'm interested in grabbing a special outpost that we'll talk about in a second. But let's look at this other plague heart over here. So it says that this is claimed by a plague heart, and it points out at the very top of the flyout. It says it's a double sword unit, it's got a plague heart, and it says that if you defeat that plague heart, you're going to get a fuel rucksack. So let's remember that, because I'm about to go take out this plague heart to free up the landmark outpost. So, Lucy, do you think this might be a good time to tell people what that is, or was there more you wanted to say about the previous subject?
What am I introducing now? I lost the sentence.
Oh, sorry. I'm about to claim a landmark outpost pretty soon, and I'm curious if you wanted to chat about those.
Yes, I do want to talk about those. Just a quick disclaimer on the rucksack thing. No changes are coming to Plague Heart loot. They are still exactly the same as they were before, with the exception of it's just now that the type of rucksack is going to be visible. So that's just something that was different. Landmarks, though. This is the other part of the Outpost feature I'm really excited about. We've been talking for a while now of ways to try and make the maps feel like their own separate, different experiences, aside from visuals and types of bases. And one of the ways that we're doing that is each map naturally has a couple of locations that are very visually iconic and look like they could be used for cool things. And so we decided to make them each into their own unique outpost. So every single map right now has one landmark outpost. The abilities it has are unique to that outpost and different from all the other landmark outposts out there. So, if you're on Meager Valley, you won't have the same one as if you're on Providence Ridge. You might see a couple things in common, but they're going to feature some very powerful benefits that I think players will really enjoy exploring.
So the example we have.
So we have a question really quick.
Okay, go.
Question from DJ Jurassic about these landmark. Just because we're already on the subject, Lucy. Are there going to be more options for these in the future?
That is really what I'm hoping for, because there are so many cool locations hidden away in this game. I think one of the most interesting things about them is just the attention that we're trying to pay to tying the mechanics to the visual theme and some kind of story. So having actual mechanics to back that up kind of furthers that. So for this, this is also still highly experimental, which is why we only have one of each for now. But someday in the future, I want to make more.
Oh, man.
Oh, that being said, if there's any favorite locations that you guys have in any of the maps that you would think would make a great landmark, I would love to hear about that. So please submit feedback forms. If you're in the beta, please go through the surveys. And otherwise, I'll be watching for these kind of things as I work on future designs.
And then one more question related to the landmark outposts that I think you should probably handle here is, when using the special or big outposts, can your survivors man them to guard and make it work? I guess now, it's kind of complicated, right? Because
they're talking about I'm assuming similar to when you check survivors into the infirmary for blood plague, where you designate specific survivors to do specific things. And no, that is not currently what we have. Behind the scenes, that requires custom UX for each individual case that we have that. So it was deemed a little bit too scope heavy for this initial release, but it's something that we have talked about as maybe revisiting sometime in the future.
Yeah, one of the challenges, one of the reasons why we're doing the public test realm is because anytime you make a change to a live game that's like this, there's a lot of potential for you to sort of upset the economy in sort of surprising ways, and so we want to be careful about making too many changes all at the same time. You know, we're very cautiously choosing a set of changes to make. Then we test them out, we make sure that they work, we get them into the live game, and then if there's other changes people are interested in, maybe we can add another layer later. But we have to be cautious about it, because if we make like 9 changes all at once, who knows what that's going to do to the in-game economy and the balance of the game.
And honestly, our change cup is really packed in there. We have a lot of things that could potentially like affect the game in huge ways. So we got a lot in, but anyways, we'll try to get more, is what I'm saying. You brought up the landmark screen, Jeff.
Yeah. You want me to look at this?
Yeah. So this is the many of you who have played Meager Valley are familiar with one of the wind farm or the windmills being claimable, and it was a power outpost previously, but with one discrepancy from the real world, it used to require fuel to run, which is
you
not
gotta use
how
fuel
wind farms work.
to run the engine that turns the windmill, obviously.
Yeah, because you got to spend energy and spend the fossil fuels to make the clean energy, because that's how that works. So we and plus the windmills are also just so iconic. Like you can see them from across the entire map. So that's like the level of distinction we're going for, with just things that are very innate to this experience. But naturally, it was a great one to turn into an outpost. So it still provides power, but you have to choose what resource you are going to use to kind of maintain it. Each landmark outpost has kind of like 3 horizontal upgrades, or you can, like, we call them strategies, and they're interchangeable, unlike other upgrade systems.
Yeah, so it doesn't go just climb a ladder. You just choose one of the 3, and then you can switch anytime you want to.
Yes. Switching can sometimes cost you influence or resources or time. It depends on the exact landmark. This may change in the future, though. We're still kind of trying this out. It's so once again, if you have feedback on any of these as you play them, please fill out the survey. We would love to hear from you.
Do you want me to claim
Lucy,
this?
Yeah.
Lucy, will if you leave this outpost, will you get refunded for like any upgrades you do and stuff like that?
I think my assumption is that we intend for that to happen. I don't know if that is currently happening.
The current behavior is based on the current refunding mechanic, which is 60% at standard, I think 50% at dread and nightmare, and then 40% at lethal, something to that effect. Okay. So I actually wrote up something for us to discuss later, but right now, like somebody actually wrote in and complained that they only got 2 out of their 5 materials back. So right now in the beta, it's applying both to the materials and the influence, and so we'll have to try to figure out if we can make it so that it doesn't apply just to everything and get it to just apply to influence or something.
Okay,
but
good to know. Great feedback. We are already getting feedback on these. I'm definitely going to look into that.
Lucy, there's an important question here from Sharficus. Please, for all coffee addicts, will Coffee Outpost get an upgrade?
Well, were you saying that they already had something new, actually, the espresso places?
So they will now teach cooking, and they were a candidate for having Outpost upgrades originally, but they won't teach the coffee specialization skill. I'm sorry, for now. But if once again, if we get enough feedback, that might grease the wheels to.
Are we going to be able to upgrade from a basic cup of coffee up to a latte, though, for instance?
No, unfortunately not. Because, like I was saying, the idea of the resource outposts, espresso outposts are technically their own thing, which is, from a system standpoint, is kind of strange. You got food, gardening, then espresso. So, but I'm losing my train of thought here.
Well, I'm actually curious. So, do you have a favorite one of these strategies that I should choose for my wind farm? Because you'll notice, by the way, I've got no power right, quite yet. I've claimed the wind farm, but I do not have power until I choose a strategy.
Well, what other resources do you think you can afford to spend on a regular basis?
Let's see here. So I've got a bunch of materials that I cheated for myself before I started this. So that might, except wait, materials are not the option.
No, it's
That's
not
right.
It's
It's parts. That's right. I had that wrong in my head.
It's parts, influence, or labor.
Well,
so labor is like your assign. It's kind of like the version of you're assigning to your people to take better care of it. Parts is like you're doing more repairs more frequently, so it's more taxing on your supplies. And then of course influences, you're hiring out the labor, because influence is our social currency.
I also cheated myself a lot of influence, and so maybe I'll go with this one.
Yeah, good choice.
Somewhat awesome Twitch dude just asked the most important question of the day, which is, can we change the food rucksack icon from pizza to tacos? And
oh man,
I'm 100% behind this idea. And as art director, I may have to use executive powers.
Only on Tuesdays. It changes tacos to just Tuesdays.
It's like it's like the mysterious wandering trader. Like it's different. It's different on different days.
Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Oh, no.
I mean, they both start with T.
Okay, so I've just chosen my strategy, and it takes 5 minutes to change strategies, so we'll be able to look at that again in a second. In the meantime, I guess I could just drive around and get in some trouble while we keep talking about this. Oh, actually, one thing that Lucy brought up that I think is probably worth discussing is that there are a lot of people who have been sort of looking at previews of this feature and predicting this feature based on data mining they did with earlier versions of the game. And there's a bunch of screenshots floating around and stuff like that of earlier versions of this feature. And I wonder if Lucy wants to talk through like a little bit of the history of this feature, some of the different things we tried, and why we settled on sort of the solution that we came up with.
Yeah. I have to say, when last week, when I almost immediately after Geoffrey's stream. Why can't I speak today? Stream.
I mean, if you're thinking about me, screaming is probably a thing you should, predict. So anyway.
No. I almost screamed because when I realized that somebody had figured out that there's new outposts in the game, like right off the bat, and then I saw, a screenshot for the stream and everything made sense. But when we first decided we were going to upgrade outposts, we had all sorts of grand ambitions. One of the ideas for me was trying to make, I wanted to focus very much on trying to tie the site visuals and theming to the mechanics, like I did with the landmarks eventually. But I originally wanted to try and do that with the other types of outposts. So what unfortunately Reddit found first was the original version where some of these playtest outposts where you could upgrade individual types of food outposts, for example, or individual types of meds outposts, for example, into different things. These were very difficult for players to understand. They had a hard time understanding what they could probably expect to do there, and the which outposts are upgradable problem, like I mentioned before, was also just a major factor in deciding to not go with that plan.
Because one of the advantages of outposts is the fact that they're fairly simple. Compared to facilities where, you actually have to really kind of study out what each facility does and what it's for. One of the advantages of, the facilities have is there's only a handful of different facilities you can install, and they each have a very, clear purpose, but each of them is individually pretty complex. And so for brand new players, learning how to, understand a facility, it takes learning all the things your workshop can do takes some time and some effort. But outposts are always fairly simple. And so what are you going to say, Lucy?
Yeah, no, even the facilities we do have, some of the advanced ones we have surprisingly low usage rates on, just because players, they only have so many slots in their base, so that is a surprisingly another limiting factor in the number of different facilities they're willing to try, because, also tying back to the optimal strategies that I mentioned earlier, that the upgradable resource outpost will hopefully alleviate. It's just you obviously need food production on lethal, or you obviously need a watchtower to keep threat low. So it kind of helps remove a few of those blockers to let you explore or feel more comfortable exploring your options and playing differently than you did last time.
Yeah.
So I'm going to break in real quick here. For those people who joined us late, let's do a really quick recap of what we're talking about.
Okay, sure. Yeah, Lucy, do you want to handle that?
Yeah. Okay, so you can upgrade resource collection outposts. You can train skills at certain outposts, but the resource outposts, like I mentioned, and then a couple of other outposts have skill books on them. There are now unique outposts on every map called landmarks. There is one per map. They offer 3 like horizontal upgrades called strategies, and you can switch between these strategies at any time. So I think that covers.
Yeah, and
everything.
this feature right now is not in the live game. It is in the public test realm, which you can get access to on Steam. If you own the game on Steam, then basically for no additional charge, you can pop over onto the public test realm branch, and you can try out all these features yourselves. But they are still being tested. We're still actively seeking feedback from players who are playing them, looking at survey data, that sort of thing, and we're trying to figure out how well this works and learn from players' experiences, so that by the time we release this to everyone, we know it a lot better and can make sure that it's a more balanced and rewarding experience.
Yeah, and Habitual Bell asks, when will this drop happen for everybody? When we get the feedback and we feel like it's a solid and ready to go.
Yeah, we don't have an official date announced for it or anything like that. We're going to try to work through all of the feedback. Not, at some point we do have to ship it, so it's not like, we're going to make it absolutely perfect and we're never going to ship it until, every possible problem has been resolved. But we are going to try to make it a lot better, before we get it out into the wild. So it'll be a little bit, but in the meantime, those of you who are in the public test realm can give us feedback and make this better. And I just realized I'm about to fight a plague heart. But no, I'm not, because I have no ammo left. So I'm gonna head home and maybe switch characters to somebody who's got more stuff.
So to build on what Lucy was saying earlier about how these outposts help you replace some of the facilities that are considered required in certain difficulties. I would just like to say that that's where we started. We had a lot of things that actually replaced facilities, and that's probably what you were seeing more in what was being leaked by the data miners. But what you've got now is slightly different in that it's a lot easier to keep the resources for the ones that you don't need, right? Or to keep resources for the ones that you do need, but you don't have to have supporting facilities inside your base anymore necessarily to keep you in meds or food, depending on how you're handling those two very specific things.
Yeah, that's right. I think the idea that I didn't quite, finish saying before was the fact that basically because facilities are so complex, when we were doing the version of this feature where we were basically taking existing facilities, what players expected from existing facilities, and say, taking a hardware store and turning it into a workshop, taking an auto shop and turning it into an auto shop facility, that was the level of complexity that you'd expect brand new players to sort of understand from their outposts. It was just a little bit too much. It's really nice to sort of split it so that the very complex things are the facilities in your base, and the outposts are something that are a little bit simpler. It's easier to sort of grok what each one of them is offering your community without needing to, if the level of complexity gets too high, then a lot of players just bounce off and they never start enjoying the game at all.
You actually reminded me. It's also another reason we moved away from the replacements was the player's ability to understand the value proposition of each outpost. We went back to resource production because that's currently the benefit that players understand outposts to be. So if we took that away from players or just left it by the wayside, I think that people might have been underwhelmed. Joe, you're saying something?
So for instance, I think the thing that I've liked most so far, I haven't really gotten through I haven't completed that many. I haven't completed any legacies in the beta yet, but I've gotten at least into sort of mid-game. The thing that I appreciate the most is that, besides the fact that I claimed a meds outpost and completely maxed out my pathology skill on lethal, with just the influence that I was able to get with the starter. Anyway, don't get me started with how awesome that was. But it's now that I don't have to worry about having somebody with iconology, so that frees up another character that I can mess around with. or having to grow meds. That means that I've got another facility that I can play around with. And I think for the first time at the starter home, I actually built a watchtower. And, you know, that's something you don't usually do until you're ready to move into like a larger base, or you already have a larger community. And it's a huge boon, really. And there is one question that I think we need to get around to. I should probably address, and then one that we've got for Lucy, so that it doesn't get lost. Um, Slutty Little Ninja on says, "Can we manage upgrade outposts from the base screen?" And the answer is yes, 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 yes. The only thing that you have to do at the outpost is to train your skill there. And so when you take your character, you have to go to the outpost. You have to train them there, but everything else can be handled on the base screen once you've claimed the outpost. And then the question for Lucy: are the strategies and landmark outposts the same for each map? And if not, what are the differences?
No, the strategies are different for every single map. You may notice some similarities between, I think it's Cascade Hills and the wind farm on Meager, because they use the same 3 resource options structure, but that's partially for my own experimental benefit, just seeing if we ever have to make like cheaper landmarks, whether or not that will be a useful thing to keep. But right now my goal is to make, like I said, focusing on the theme. I wanted to make the strategies feel very connected to what the actual location that you're playing in. So you'll notice probably I think that the weirdest one in my opinion right now is on Providence Ridge.
Yeah.
I personally, you know, like I said, if we run out of time, we can go into it, but I want to leave some stuff for players to explore. But that one has 3 very different functions that I think players are going to find a lot of use out of.
Dakar Druid brings up an interesting point. They have concern that this is going to make the game too easy, and I mean, basically that's what our public test realm is all about, is letting us balance with more than just the people at the office playing this game. So, and I didn't want to take away your thunder, Lucy, because you've been living this for a long time.
Yeah,
but
no, you hit it right on the head too. Like we, you know, we're doing this as a job, so we don't have the time to play it long term and experience it in the same way that the rest of our player base would. So this is really where the public test realm is going to help us, is that extensive long term feedback. Because there's also a really important thing with playtesting is that sometimes people can be influenced by you know, just familiarity with the system. So if they've been working on it for the whole time, they might see it from a different perspective than a fresh player would, or even just a seasoned player of State of Decay 2 who has never seen the update before.
Yeah, whenever you're designing a feature, you always have sort of the ideal use of that feature in your head, and it's really hard to break out of that. Like when you playtest your own stuff, you always playtest it in the ideal way that you originally planned. And the thing you can't figure out is, what is somebody who is unfamiliar with this feature going to do to, you know, coming to it with completely fresh eyes. And a lot of the time, the most obvious thing for a new player to do with a feature is the last thing that the person who designed the feature is ever going to think of. And so so that's why a public test room like this is so valuable, because it lets us catch stuff like that. And you know, one thing that you know, we've been getting, you know, some of the feedback we've been getting on Plague Territory is actually, you know, so there's some anxiety from players that it might make the game sort of like affect the pace of the game in a way that makes it a little bit too challenging to you know, to get access to all of the resources and things that you need. And so our hope, I think, is that, you know, we do expect that Plague Territory will make you know, getting all of the things that you need for your base more challenging. And we expect that the Outpost upgrade is going to make getting all of the things you need for your base less challenging. And so the hope is that the two of them will balance each other out, and it'll actually make the game feel more interesting and balanced.
There's also
if I may,
go for it.
Go ahead.
To kind of throw wrench in the gears of the idea that this is going to slow the game down. I was watching Fall Down Go Boom, and he's he's like the speedrunner of State of Decay 2, and he actually dropped half an hour in his time the first attempt that he made on the lethal speedrun.
Nice.
So I don't know that it's necessarily going to slow the game down. I think it's just going to be that there are going to be some. I think that the Plague Territory is going to pose some different challenges. You're going to have to approach the map in a slightly different way, but it's not necessarily like it's not running straight into quicksand for the player.
Yeah, I think that the thing that I think a lot of players are anticipating and are worrying about sometimes is that it's because they've got players who've been playing this game a lot. They've got a lot of established habits, right, and a sense of sort of comfort in the way they usually play the game. And some of these features are going to change that up. They're going to disrupt those habits, and it'll make it, playing the game feel different. It's going to feel, it's going to have a different rhythm. It's going to have a different cadence, and that can be, something that anything that's unfamiliar, especially if you've gotten very used to the way that a game works, can feel uncomfortable. And so, we need to sort of figure out the right sort of line to draw between someone, a reaction to the game being, uncomfortable because it's unfamiliar, and a reaction to it being uncomfortable because it's unbalanced. And those are two different situations, and we need to correct for one of them. We don't necessarily need to correct for the other, depending on the overall reactions from players.
Which, if I may plug at this point, we need people in the beta. So if you own this game on Steam, make sure that you opt in. There should be you should be able to go over to the little gear icon on State of Decay 2, pull up the settings, click on betas, and see that there is one available. You can, as long as you have the game on Steam, you can join, and we would love to have your feedback. Sorry, Lucy, I'm interrupting you.
No, you're fine. It does remind me, like, people who like to play multiplayer I would be interested in hearing the effect that has on the resource economy as well. But the balancing factor, I also think, with outposts is currently the number of outpost slots you can have is still fairly limited. We don't offer too many ways for the player to increase it. I think like at most, when you've gotten every possible thing, you can have like 7 or 8. So it's not going to be possible for most players to get like one of each outpost, for example, and have all their resources coming in. So we expect that will balance it out a little bit, but the rest is once again why we have a public test realm.
Lucy, here's a good question. We may have already answered, I'm not sure. Are all the 5th trade skills learnable on every map if you have the right outposts?
Yes. So unless there is like an outpost that we have missed on one of these maps, which I'm pretty sure we haven't, like these are available on every single map. It's just a matter of tracking down the existing outpost type that it corresponds to. So, for example, gardening skill books or skill training action will always be found on food outposts. You can always count on the chemistry training action on ammo outposts. Cooking will always be on the espresso outpost. So as long as you find one of those that to meet your needs, like that, you will have access to that training action.
Cool. Yeah, I can't underscore how important I think these two features are going to be to the long-term play of this game. I mean, we're talking about fundamentally altering the way you can play your base and how you approach this stuff, and I think it's super exciting, especially for mid to long-term players. I can't underscore enough how important I think the work Lucy's been doing, and the rest of the team as well. And again, Lucy, thank you so much for your enthusiasm on this. She showed up and threw her bags on the floor, didn't even move in before she started working on this stuff, and we're super happy to have you on board.
Oh, thanks. It's definitely, I'm really excited to finally see this in the wild. And once again, I couldn't do this alone, so just huge shout out to the I'm not sure if I can actually say what our start team name is called on the air, but you know who you are.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
you've done amazing work.
One of our producers thought it would be amusing to name our strike teams on our team after elements of a children's television show from the early 2000s, I believe. And so yeah, unfortunately, it makes it hard because I'm not sure we can actually say the names of these things on the air without getting in trouble. But
Which, by the way, all of those names were completely lost on me. Thank you.
Oh yeah,
I had no idea what you guys were talking about.
Yeah, the 2000s is the perfect time for me to be completely unaware of children's television because my kids were born a little bit after that, most of them, and and I was of course no longer a child, so it's in that exact window.
Okay, so another question from chat. You have an eight-person base. You move maps until you clear like 5 plague hearts just to grab the best base. We would lose tons of materials. Have we thought about ways to mitigate that issue?
So the storage systems, we recognize, or it's something we recognized during playtesting of this feature, like early on, is that storage is certainly an unexpected problem that players are running into. So we do want to look into that and ways we can possibly mitigate that with changes to Outpost maybe or other things in the future. We don't have exact plans right now, but it's something we want to plan for.
There is a feature that is supposed to give you at least a short window where we are not stealing your materials because you've outstripped your storage. I'm not sure that it works 100% of the time as intended, though. There may be a bug in that feature that leads some players to suffer losses that we didn't hope that they would suffer. And so yeah.
I think the big concern here, and I'll certainly take a closer look at this as the player voice as close as I can. But when you switch maps, you often have, especially in like lethal, because of the prices are so much higher, you often have close to 200 materials when you switch maps that all get refunded, and so there's no way that can ever really be mitigated. Well, I'll try to take a look and see what we can do. I'll probably need to put a card in to check out what that timer actually is so that we give people more time.
Actually, I just had a fantastic idea. So definitely write the idea card, but I think I'm already trying to work on this.
All right, nice. Yeah, and so Lucy is being very clever not to say it on the air in case when she explores her idea, it turns out not to work. That's why we don't usually announce stuff, when it's fresh in our heads, because we've all had the experience so many times of thinking we've got the answer and then we realize that it's not. But yeah, you folks have I love how folks who comment here on the stream can have such an immediate impact on our plans, because some of our best ideas do come from whether it's here on the stream or interacting with you folks on social media or getting your survey results from the public test realm. Like there's so many occasions where people have had an experience or made a point and we've immediately gotten to go and fix it. I had a couple of those recently, actually. Like one where I watched a streamer playing our game for the very first time, and she ended up being confused about one of our controls in the tutorial, and I was able to just go immediately and just alter the way the tutorial plays out to account for that exact problem. Or somebody pointed out on my personal stream today that they'd noticed a problem with the typesetting in our Outpost flyouts, that the bullet points weren't evenly spaced, and we've already had a programmer has already looked at it and has already come up with a solution for it. So
and also I would just like to reiterate what I said at the beginning, is that the outpost as a feature, the initial idea was inspired by posts that were made on our wish list as well. And so make sure that you are engaging in any way that you can, whether it's through taking part in the beta, giving us feedback, with going to the wish list, which has recently been cleaned up and much easier to keep track of now as a result. And, the other things that Geoffrey just said, I can't remember.
Well, we're running low on time. Why don't we take one last question from the audience? Undead Toad wants to know, and this is something we confirmed earlier on the stream, but we should reiterate it. Are the upgraded outposts only those which have the red discs? And I believe that Toad is talking about these discs. Some of these outposts are represented just by icons. Some of them are an icon on a circle, and they're red when they're inside the plague territory. They're gray when they're outside the plague territory. But yeah, Lucy, do you want to confirm what exactly these discs mean?
So I think we decided on They're basically to, first of all, identify outposts that give resources and have upgrades. And second, we see circles, of course, behind things like your player bases and the enclaves, and I think a few other things as well.
Yeah,
Just,
the landmark outposts have them, and I think
Yes.
don't the water. I think that the
yeah, claimed outposts have their own circle as well, but in terms of the unclaimed sites that have the discs behind them, I'm pretty sure that's meant to indicate that it has an up. It's either like significant or has.
yeah.
I'm honestly forgetting that what we actually decided
So
on. So this might be
think,
something.
I think the rule. I think you could actually. Probably the closest thing to a rule of thumb for figuring out which ones have the disc is the ones that teach you skills, because the upgradable resource
Yes.
outposts have them. The power and water outposts have them. And actually, no, I'm wrong about that, because I think the espresso outposts don't have them. So we kind of had to make a judgment call here, because we tried a couple of different just hard and fast rules about what gets a disc and what doesn't, and each hard and fast rule felt like it was leaving something out or including too many things and not communicating well with the players. So we ended up just going with a curated list of the outposts that we thought particularly new players would want to have highlighted to them, so they would understand which sites are valuable as outposts and which ones they can probably ignore, at least at first, until they've gotten more used to the system.
Yeah, and if you, once again, if you have thoughts on that at all, please fill out the beta survey. Please participate in our beta on Steam. We need all of the data we can get.
All right, well, we're getting pretty close to the end here. Does anyone have sort of a last thing that we wanted to make sure we talked about? Oh, I guess one thing that we can mention for those of you who are getting involved in the public test realm is the fact that if you just drop, so we're gonna fork your save. So when you've been playing the game on Steam already for a while and you join the public test realm for the first time, we're gonna copy your save over, so you're starting with the same community you've always had, and you're gonna land in your map, and you're not going to have the Outpost upgrade available to you yet in the community that you've already gotten going. In order to see this feature and help us with it, you've got to either start a new community or move maps or change map difficulty with your current community. That will refresh the map, and the new outposts and the new features on the outposts will only land after the map gets refreshed. So make sure you're doing that, and you're not just sort of dropping into the public test realm and going, I don't see anything different, what's going on, and sending us that feedback. So yeah, we've only got a couple of minutes left. So I think it's probably time to start wrapping things up. So let me just sort of give each of you a chance to make any final points you want to make and say goodbye to the audience. Lucy, especially, thank you so much for coming on here and explaining the work that you've been doing for the past little while. I know that you've been on this stream so many times and you have not been able to talk about this. So thank you for coming on here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I am glad to finally talk about this feature and excited to see what happens with our beta. There's also further secrets that I'm working on that I cannot talk about yet, so I'll get to come back and tell you guys about those too. Anyways.
Yeah, Joe, thank you for being on here too, especially giving your perspective as such an experienced and avid player of the game. Any last words before we move on?
Yeah. In fact, I'll just answer this question since it came in a little bit late. But your save, since you mentioned that it was going to be split, your save from the public test realm will not be deleted. It will just forever live in that one branch only. And when the changes are live, we've tended to, in the beta, make it so that you can play with others as well. So there's not really a downside to playing in the public test realm, other than the fact that you get to every once in a while you might encounter some interesting bugs.
Yeah.
But that's when you get to talk to me more. So
so basically whenever the features that are in the public test realm go live, those features will show up in the main branch, and then that beta, that sort of the public test realm, is still going to sit there, and we can add new features to it that have still not gone live. So if you keep that community, those saves going in that public test realm, these features are going to move on into the main branch, but then new things could still show up. And so it's definitely worthwhile to sort of invest in this stuff long term. Thank you, Joe, for being on here.
No, and thank you for having me. I'm really excited about these changes. I've known for a really long time that they were coming, and I think it revitalizes the way that you interact with a map in a way that I hope that all players are going to find interesting. And you know, you'll tell more about this later, but I'll be back next week to talk more about that.
Yeah, I was actually just about to say that Joe, our stream next week is going to be hosted by Joe. He's coming to talk a little bit more in depth about the implications on base building and strategy that come from these new features. So I'm looking forward to that. Brant, do you have any last words before we go?
Yeah, well, as usual, I just want to thank everyone in our community for being here with us, and be good to each other, listen with empathy, and you know, enjoy the game, and keep coming back. We love you.
And with that, we are going to head out. So next week, like I said, Joe Swarner is going to be our host. He's going to be talking about strategic implications of the new features that have arrived in the public test realm. And at the same time, we've got a new bounty pack. Well, an old bounty pack that's going to be landing, the anniversary pack, which we hope you'll all, you know, go and check out. So with that, I guess we'll get out of here in about 20 seconds after the YouTube end screen is done.
Oh, I don't know how to make these awkward anymore, Geoffrey.
You could try stretching. Everyone needs to stretch every now and again.
Oh, yeah.
But if I
I've been
stretch,
sitting too long.
if I stretch, the spine pop might come through my microphone.